Hey, Robin. Are you there? You were on mute, I think.
I am here. I should be good. Can you
You're
hear
good.
me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Just, trying to soak up this springtime that we have before it gets ridiculously too hot. What about yourself?
Yeah, about the same. On spring break this week, which is really nice. And if people haven't followed California weather, we had like torrential downpours for what felt like 6 years. So the fact that I can look outside and see sun in mid 70s, it's all has been restored here in Southern California. So we're doing pretty well.
Well, that's awesome.
Yep.
So what's
Go
top of
ahead.
mind for you in education right now, Scott? It's been a little hot second since we last chatted. So
It
what are you
has.
hearing?
Yeah, coming off the conferences this year, I think I've mentioned to you, really excited about the energy. And what always amazes me about our roles as school leaders is once you hit even January, February, but certainly by April and May kind of time, you've already turned the page to next year. So, talking about new technology, new curriculum, and that kind of thing. And just, I'm always reminded about how quickly the year goes. My school is 7 weeks from the end of the year. I know others are even closer to the end of the year. So it's just that deep breath and that big push down to the finish,
That's exciting.
It is something to look forward to. How's everything in your world? How are you hanging in there as the year kind of speeds on?
Yeah, same thing as Q4 for us. That's end of our fiscal year here at Microsoft. A lot of new exciting announcements that have been coming out here, and honestly, just like super exciting technology, and can't even stay on top of it fast enough to know what's coming out when. Our customers are all super excited, wanting to learn all about the new AI features, co-pilot integrations across the platform, et cetera. And so, I think one of the things that we're consistently seeing is a lot of excitement from both higher education, K-12 education, academic medical centers about some of this new technology and how it's really going to transform and change the way they do their jobs every day. But right now we're just like, it's just coming fast, right? So for the first time since I think I've been at Microsoft, I feel like we're a startup company, which you don't say to a company who's been around for like 50 years and
Right.
and as big as we are, but things are moving fast. People are being super nimble. They're just pushing things out very, very quickly. So we're just trying to get our hands wrapped around it, and so that we can have the most intelligent conversations and provide the most clarity that we can for all of our customers that are so eager to want to know, what this means or how do they deploy some of these new technologies in their environments.
Yep. Well, and as it relates to education, I mean, doesn't that just speak to where we are now and where education is going with the way that AI and all these technologies are going to affect teaching and learning? I mean, education is going to have to catch up, right? We're going to have to finally, stop lagging behind and procrastinating and really jump on board to keep our students and our teachers up to date.
Yeah, it's been interesting, even in that regard, that with, clearly a lot of these new announcements, some people have put the brakes on and are like, oh, we're blocking everything, we're turning everything off. And then we have quite a few people who are like, no, we're going to keep things open. We want to partner with you guys at Microsoft or insert whoever to understand what this looks like. We don't even know what's possible, so help us reinvent what's possible. So I think this is going to be a really interesting turn in education as far as those who are choosing to like embrace this full throttle, and then those who are definitely like putting up the blockers and not interested. So we'll see where this goes. But with fairness, everything's should be done with precaution and an understanding of what this technology is and how it can have implications that could be scary. I mean, at the end of the day. So by no means not understanding that people shouldn't be cautious, but just trying to do this in a secure, safe way with some ethics behind it, I think is important. But ultimately, I think this is the next shift in society. Really, this is like when the internet came out and it was like, oh, this is going to reinvent how we live. This is where this is that next place. So it's just an exciting time to be in that area of business and focus. And, I imagine 20 years from now, I'll look back and say, oh yeah, I remember the day when we made that announcement and like, look how far we've come. So
look where we are. Yeah, exactly. And speaking of exciting times and changes in the landscape of education, I know you are too. I'm excited to learn from our friend Tyler today and how he views education and the changes and shifts that he's seen. So should we bring him on to the conversation?
Let's do it. I'm super excited to learn from Tyler tonight.
Love it. So we are really excited to welcome our friend Tyler Rablin to the show. Tyler's a high school language arts teacher and former instructional coach for the Sunnyside School District in Sunnyside, Washington. Beautiful. It just sounds sunny, even though we know it rains in the Pacific Northwest all the time. It sounds beautiful. He's the owner of Tyler Rablin Consulting, partners with the consulting group Shifting Schools, is a contributing writer for Edutopia, and has been a featured speaker around the conference circuit, and also has a book coming out. Another one of these people, I don't know how he finds time for anything with all the different jobs that he does, but a wonderful speaker. I've had the chance to see him in person and in a couple of sessions online, and just a really, really great guy. Really values authentic assessment, building strong classroom culture, and we are excited to learn from him today on all things education. So Tyler, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us, my friend.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited.
You bet.
So Tyler, just to kind of kick us off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your role, the work you're doing in education, a little bit about yourself altogether, but I just want to welcome you to the show and tell us all about yourself.
Well, thank you. So first and foremost, I'm a high school English teacher. I teach mostly freshmen. I always taught upper grades and never thought I would enjoy teaching freshmen, but not too long ago, I made the switch to teaching freshmen, and the energy that you get from freshmen, like sometimes you just have to point it in the right direction. Sometimes it's a lot, but it's fun. So that's what I spend most of my time doing. And outside of that, I get the opportunity to work with schools and districts, and really around assessment is kind of my primary focus. But a lot of times that ends up merging with assessment and educational technology, because the two work together, or can work together really, really well. So that's kind of my role in education. Outside of that, my favorite thing to do is just be outside. I'm a avid hiker and camper. I actually have a 25K race this weekend that I'm not at all prepared for, but we'll see how it goes.
I don't know how you prepare for a 25K race anyway.
My friend made me climb up and down a bunch of hills the other weekend, so I think that's how you do it. I don't know.
That is not part of my vocabulary. Sorry.
No, mine either. You're a better person than we are. So Tyler, you kind of heard us in the open. Obviously, there's so many exciting things happening in education, and I definitely want to dig into the assessment piece and some of the things that we've talked about over the past couple of years. But just in general, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges right now as you look at education in 2023? Not just with AI and everything coming, but just in general, teacher crisis, post-COVID, all those things. What are the challenges that you're seeing in your own classroom? And as you go around to conferences and interact and consult with other schools and educators, what are you seeing? What comes to mind in that scope?
I think some of the biggest challenges the education system is grappling with right now, they go hand in hand, but you're seeing a lot of teachers feeling really burnt out or overwhelmed or kind of frustrated with how things are going in their classrooms. And on the opposite side, you see a bunch of students who are struggling to engage in school the way that we want them to. And I think those two go hand in hand, where you have teachers who, are trying to do things that they think are going to work, and they're just not seeing it necessarily work the way they expect, or they're not seeing students show up the way that they were hoping. And this isn't to put it on students. There's a sort of a changing nature of motivation going on in our world right now. And the school system that we operate in oftentimes doesn't quite match up with how motivation seems to happen outside of our school walls, where, we're still operating very much in the industrialized version of motivation, where it's carrots and sticks. It's, I make you work faster by either incentivizing you to do more, or you work slow and we punish you for that. And I think sometimes schools are still built around this model, thinking that that's how it's going to work. And we're really running into an issue where we're seeing, like, our school building operates that way, but the kids and the adults in the building operate a very different way, where, you're seeing, if you just look in the workforce, you're seeing people quit high paying jobs to go pursue something that gives them more purpose, more meaning. And that shift is disrupting the job landscape, but it's also something we're seeing in schools, where we are motivated by things that give us purpose, give us meaning, tap into our passions. And schools having a hard time catching up with that. And I think that's probably, and it's kind of twofold. So that's where teachers are feeling that stress, that burnout, that frustration, and students are also kind of feeling that same sort of thing. And I think a lot of it comes back to what is the nature of motivation now, and are schools able to harness that? Are schools willing to harness that? Because it's, I like, it sounds simple when you say it out loud, but it's a major shift and major changes that have to happen in schools in order for us to really be able to do that.
So to dig in there just a little bit more. So obviously those are the causes and the stressors that you're indicating, that many people are feeling, both just from basically pulling from two different directions. Have you worked with / observed any school that is starting to do this right and hitting the mark where they're getting more satisfaction, that they're able to motivate their students in ways that are more aligned to their passions and their goals and their timetables, et cetera, versus the industrial model of education that's been around for far too long?
Yeah, I think there are really good examples of schools doing it on a whole scale of, and really what it comes down to is, in education, we so often think that what really matters are for lack of a better term, the unnecessary details of, we're going to learn this and we're going to do it this way. And I think a lot of schools are recognizing that the more we can peel that back to, this is something we need to learn, and recognizing that when we step back and focus on that, that opens a lot of doors for people to pursue it in different ways. I mean, even just from the teacher side of things, there are a lot of schools that are I want to be careful so I don't upset anyone by saying this, but are really focused on, if we can control the content that's being taught, that's our way of guaranteeing that there's not going to be any errors, that students are all going to receive the same quality of education. But what that's doing is it's pigeonholing educators into teaching maybe in styles that don't connect with their personality. They're pigeonholing people into approaching assessment, approaching content delivery in ways that aren't tapping into their passions, what excites them. And so you're seeing that from the teacher side. And then, the teachers who are able to say, listen, and I've had this conversation with my administrator. I sat down and said, this isn't working right now. What do we really need to do? What do the students need to walk away with? And I think in the classrooms and schools that are asking that question, what are the core things students really need to walk away with, is where you start seeing some of that freedom to be able to adapt school to a model that works better for kids and for adults, of being able to say, for me, I'm an English teacher. We need to work on reading skills. I've made the switch. I asked my administrator if I could step away from the curriculum and really just focus on letting students choose what they're going to read. And then we're going to work with the skills within that, so that the vehicle for motivation, their books, are things they have control over. They have sort of that autonomy that we know really taps into our motivation and purpose. So they get that autonomy, and then we use that as a vehicle to focus on the learning. And I think when that can switch in classrooms and in schools, where we recognize that the vehicle for the learning is often what we focus on, but sometimes that vehicle doesn't need to be chosen by us. It can be chosen by a student. For writing, if I'm going to ask students to write an essay, why am I dictating that this is exactly what you're writing about, when they have passions and interests and things that they care about that they could choose instead? And so instead of me saying, you're going to write about this and this is what it's going to look like, and then being confused when the motivation's not there, instead I can say, hey, what motivates you? What's something that you're passionate about? And once that's there, then we can sort of harness it and channel it and point it in a direction. And so I think there are schools that do that, but it's hard to shift a school, especially, I work it's 2,100 students. There's just my little freshman English team has 9 people that are on it. It's hard to make changes quickly, but I'm seeing it on small scales in classrooms. Teachers that are willing to say, hey, this isn't working. Administrators that are willing to kind of give the reins to a teacher and let them try some things out. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening on sort of these micro scales inside of schools.
Specific to teachers, Tyler, I'm curious, because I think it's easier for us to envision, or maybe just more frequent for us to talk about, the change that has with the students, right? When we tap into their passions. But either from your own experience or those that you've worked with, what changes do you see in the teachers when an environment of like this is fostered, where students' passions are really sparked and they're given kind of the freedom to learn more freely and more passionately?
I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that at first, it's not an easy transition, right? We're used to teaching one way, and then we go straight into letting students have more control. And there's an ebb and flow. It's going to feel a little chaotic. You're going to have to pull back and make adjustments. So that transition can be difficult. But I mean, as someone who got the freedom for students to choose their books, I mean, I think about when I was choosing books for the students and asking them to read and really setting their schedules and things like that, a lot of it came down to, why aren't you doing this? Right? It was a frustrating thing at times when I would see students who weren't engaging. And that can overshadow some of the joy of teaching when we just feel like kids aren't showing up, aren't engaging. And, you know, it really, when we focus on letting students show up in ways that are meaningful to them, it's really fun to get to be a part of that, because then there's more energy in the room. You get to know your students in a different way. Like I have a student who has a business crocheting, and I didn't even know that she had that business until she really wanted to like start writing about it and focus on like building her business as part of what we do in class. And so you just really, you get to feel more of their excitement. And the cool part is you let kids show up as their whole selves, not this little piece that we allow them to bring into the classroom, but they start feeling comfortable bringing their whole self into the classroom. And as an educator, that's a super rich, rewarding experience when you get to see kids and help them develop the things that they care about.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate you leaning into them and being curious about those parts of their lives too. So they're lucky to have you, Tyler. I'd love to kind of dig in a little bit more around your specific work with assessment and, you know, viewing assessment. There's a lot of controversy with assessment and education altogether. But we're in general, where do you feel like we're, as a system, we're kind of missing the boat in regards to assessment, and what better approaches should we be looking at and changing practices in regards to assessment?
I think one of the big areas comes down to this term that I always run into when I'm thinking about how I want assessment to be approached in my own classroom, and it's using multiple and varied tools to gather information. Because really, when we frame it as we're gathering evidence of learning from kids versus we're getting grades, we're giving them grades, but really looking for, hey, this is the thing that we're focused on, we're learning about, and looking for the spaces where students are giving us evidence that they are learning, that they are growing. I think a lot of times when you see students frustrated or shut down in the assessment process, it's because they feel like their knowledge isn't valued, at least in the way we're asking them to show us their understanding, their information. And so being able to be more flexible with how we're gathering that evidence of learning, I think, is one of the areas that education hasn't moved forward as much as I would have expected. I mean, there's been evidence around for years and years and years that, you know, portfolios are a very valuable method of assessing students and determining their understanding. Of sitting down with students and having conferences is a really good way to really get a better picture of what they know. Our typical tools of tests and quizzes, I mean, they have value, but so often we think that is the be all end all of assessment in schools. And like the analogy I like to use is those are our bricks, but we don't have any of the, I just am a paranoid. This is not going to be the right term. Is it mortar that you put between bricks? Is that what it is? Right? Okay, good. It's like you have the bricks and we're trying to build this understanding of a student out of just bricks, but it's those conversations, those overhearing them in group work. That's where that mortar comes in. And you really are able to build a better understanding of what the student knows, of their journey. Like, and I think that we don't value that journey of assessment. And I think you mentioned at the beginning of the show, kind of AI and how that's showing up in education. And I think the fact that we haven't valued the process of learning and the journey of learning is where you see some of that pushback with AI showing up in classrooms, where it's always been about the product, and kids can have AI generate the product really easily, and they might not have any idea what that product actually means. And so when we focus instead on, hey, let's sit down and talk about your writing, that's a very different way of assessing students. And it's, I mean, unless they've somehow invented AI that can like implant speakers in students' mouths, I don't think they're going to be able to, like, you know, pull the wool over our eyes that way. Yeah, not yet. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned too, Tyler, the intersection of assessment and grades, and I know that's a passion for both of us. And how do we make that shift? Because I know you and I see it at the high school level, right? As they get farther and farther into that K-12 experience, it's really about task completion, right? And point hoarding, not necessarily about the learning journey. So you mentioned things like portfolios and kind of looking at learning as a journey, which you and I speak that language pretty regularly. But how do we help other teachers realize we have to get away from those traditional grading methodologies? Because grades and assessment we have to give a grade, right? We have to give an evaluation on it, but how do we return the focus to learning and not have it be so much on the points?
And to your point, Scott, I say it's not just even the teachers, right? It's the actual students themselves, because we see that they're listening. Totally. Tell me what I need to do to get the A. Like, can I get those boxes checked? Because that's what I need to do. And so, like, getting the student to actually appreciate the learning process, the learning journey, and that what it took to get there, and that's more important than the output of the end result. But so many, I would say, even high performing students just want to know what's necessary to get the grade.
Yeah. I think for both cases, one of the big things that it comes down to is helping both teachers and students understand how extrinsic motivation works. Because when we're talking grades, when we're talking points, that's really what we're talking about. And the tricky part, where I think sometimes we fall short of helping teachers understand why grades aren't the best motivators, is because in reality, they do motivate students to do something, but we never ask what the thing is that they're motivating students to do. And it's, if you look, a lot of the research around extrinsic motivation, it motivates people to do simple tasks. There's like algorithmic tasks of there's a clear start and an end. So completing an assignment, like that's an algorithmic task. I do A, B, C, I turn it in, it's done. Extrinsic motivation can, not always, but can be beneficial in that. And teachers oftentimes see that as conflated with learning. It feels like learning's happening because, we put a grade on it, so they turned it in. The tricky part is, it often, those extrinsic motivators get in the way of those heuristic processes or complex processes, which is what we want learning to be. And so while we're saying, where students aren't turning in work, I need to put a grade on it so they do the work. Yes, that work might get turned in, but the problem is we've made it harder for the student to learn. There's some really cool studies about what happens when you put too much extrinsic motivation on something. And I mean, no surprise, if you ask anyone who was obsessed with grades in high school or college, or look at any student who's obsessed with grades, when they start panicking about their grade or they start getting stressed about it, their performance drops. Across the board, we start feeling anxious. Our brain, sort of that fight, flight, or freeze, takes over, and we don't do as well. And it's that stress that really becomes the issue. And I think a lot of times what we don't recognize as teachers, when we're really just thinking about should we make a shift in assessment in our classroom, is recognizing the importance of the student's emotional state on their ability to learn. One of my favorite things I do is I have a 3-question survey I ask my students, and then if I work with other schools, oftentimes I'll ask them, and it just says, do grades help you learn? How do grades make you feel? And why do teachers use grades? And that has been one of the most powerful tools in helping teachers understand why we need to make a shift. Because especially when you look at how do grades make you feel, you've got the most common response I get is just dumb. Like, students will just say dumb. And no teacher would ever want to send that message to a kid in their classroom. Like, you wouldn't walk up to a student and say, hey, you're dumb. Like, that just would never happen. And we don't think about it that way. Yeah, right. But when we use grades, that's the message they're getting. Yeah. And so really just thinking about, okay, this is the impact that it's having on kids, is they're young people looking for anything to bounce their identity off of, and grades are something they oftentimes do. So that's why, I mean, when we get to high school, oftentimes you see students who, I know the term is learned helplessness, but I always think forced helplessness. Like, they've spent so much time looking in mirrors of D's and F's, and that's the identity they've built for themselves. And that's who they feel they are. And breaking them out of that narrative, that story, is really tough. And you see that on both ends, not just students who have struggled in school, but students who've excelled in school. encouraging them to pursue something that's difficult or something they may struggle with, that's a narrative that we have to, is really hard to break there too. That's why grading reform, and especially on a small scale in a classroom, is really difficult, because students have this understanding and experience of who they are in relationship to grades. And it requires a lot of work of really helping them understand that, grades do not reflect what what you've learned. Like they're a very poor way of condensing who you are and what you've learned into one little letter. And it's tough for students to break out of that. I always try to do in the first couple weeks an experience where most of what they do, they don't see any scores. They just get feedback and they revise, and they get feedback and revise. And we talk about what that process was like, how successful they felt, because oftentimes they haven't had that experience of just getting feedback and not seeing a grade, not knowing necessarily where they're at minus that feedback. And it's a tough experience for a lot of students. They just want to know, did I pass? Did I do okay? Most of them want to know, did I lose points? That's what they're always thinking about when they think about grades. Not, did I get anything? It's like, did I not lose points is all they're worried about. And so breaking us as teachers out of this feeling that grades can be a positive thing in the classroom is tough. But you're right. It's also helping students understand that their grade in the classroom oftentimes is something that can hinder their performance, or hinder not just their performance, but their actual enjoyment in learning.
And it's something that doesn't stop when they leave, K-12 or even higher education. When young people go into the workforce, they take these things with them, right? And so they feel that when they receive maybe not glowing remarks on a review in their first job, that they associate, these not so great remarks mean that I'm a failure. They literally associate, this means I'm just average C employee, or I'm an F because I didn't get, only earned half credit for this. So therefore I'm a failure. And I think that it goes on and it's carried through our entire professional careers that students choose to make, down the long term, which again goes back to the receiving negative feedback or not glowing remarks is not an indication of success or failure. It's an indication that you have opportunities to learn and grow. And so, this obviously then just ties right into growth mindset, right? And are we really preparing students for a growth mindset to receive and take on critical feedback as opportunities to learn and grow? And if we can harness that when they're young, then hopefully we progress as a society. And as they go into the business places and their workforce and their professional careers, they will take that with them as well. And so that they become this lifelong learner that we all want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And growth mindset, that term is always so interesting, because it is absolutely valuable that people develop it. But I think in education, we put that burden on students instead of recognizing that that's something that is to be trained. Like it requires a level of confidence to believe you can be successful. Like if someone didn't have that confidence and never thought they'd be successful, they're not going to persist in a task. Why would they? I don't. If I know something's not going to, like if I've already messed up something and it's not going to turn out, I'm probably not just going to keep doing that same thing. And so helping them build that confidence, but also giving them experiences where they fail and that's not permanent, right? Like they make a mistake and it's okay. You're going to get feedback. And then for them to recognize, because I think a lot of times in schools, they make mistakes or they get negative feedback, and that's imprinted in stone in the grade book, and they never get to improve on that. And so they just view it as that's bad. And their brain essentially gets trained that this is a threat. And anytime I get a low grade, that's a threat. And I'm going to shut down. And I'm not in a place to be able to recognize that as, it's an opportunity for growth because I didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this, Tyler, kind of brings to a nice close this conversation around a passion that we share, which is around neuroscience. And, when we talk about growth mindset and just how the brain learns, it amazes me, as I know it does you, how few teachers really understand this. I think I said the analogy when we were at NCCE together, like you would never take your car to a mechanic who had never studied the engine. You would never go into surgery with a doctor who had never studied the body, yet we put students in classrooms with teachers who have never really studied the brain and understood it. Can you give folks just a little bit of an idea of why this is so important, why we have to understand how the brain learns to better inform our practices of teaching growth mindset and learning through failure, and just how teachers and students make better connections throughout this learning journey.
Yeah, I think on a really kind of foundational level, there are things that happen to students in classrooms and not even in classrooms before they come to class, outside of classrooms, that put their brain in a spot where it can't learn. Right? Like the analogy, there's a really good video of a zebra running away from a lion where it's like, that's fight, flight, or freeze. And the zebra is not going to trip over something and be like, this is a great learning experience. Let me slow down and process it. That's just like, that's not how the brain works when it's in that state. And I think even just something as simple as that, recognizing that, you know, when students are in those states, it's not possible for their brain to learn and to really do some of that deep processing that needs to happen. They're just looking to survive in that moment. And I wish if I could wave a magic wand and give every teacher in the world one extra planning period a day, like I think that would solve a number of issues, because time is so critical when it comes to being able to learn these things. It's, you know, understanding neuroscience feels like something that's in the background. And so it's not this pressing need that you see a lot of PD around, or you see a lot of, you know, teachers able to engage in. There's some great organizations doing work around it, but it's just, it does take time. But, you know, I will say, if you're listening to this, like that time has been crucial for me to take to really understand this, because it means the things that I do in the classroom, I can leverage things a little bit better. Or, you know, instead of having to spend a ton of time prepping something, I can recognize this is the key thing that the student will need. This is how much, you know, if we want to talk about like working memory and cognitive load theory, this is how much their brain's going to be able to handle. So let's not throw 15 things at them. That's going to take us 3 hours to prep, when really their brain needs 3 to 5 right now. So not only is it good for kids, but I think learning it and understanding it as an educator is good for us. It can save us time, make us more efficient, which every educator needs more time and the ability to be more efficient these days.
Amen.
Well, Tyler, it's been our pleasure having you join us tonight and learn so much about the amazing things that you're doing and the opportunities you're providing for your learners. I'm jealous that, you know, I didn't have the opportunity to be in your class at one point in time. I think it'd be a great experience. But before we let you leave the show, we wanted to see if you'd be down for a few lightning round questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So I guess I'll kick us off over here. What food can you not live without?
Oh man. Do potatoes count? I have a joke. Potatoes in any form. Specifically, I have a weakness for tater tots. I'll be totally honest there.
Nice.
Do you make your own, or do you have like a favorite, you know, fast food joint that you pick them up at?
So McMinimans makes their Cajun tots. If you've never been to a McMinimans and had Cajun tots, they're well worth it. But my roommate in college worked there and taught me how to make them myself. So that's now my favorite, like, party trick, basically, be able to make McMinimans Cajun tots.
That's awesome.
Nice. You'll have to send us the recipe post show, because I've never heard of this McMinimans. So
yeah.
Oh, they're so good. And they're not healthy. Don't expect them to be healthy, because they are far from it.
Nor should they be.
All right. Next one up for you. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you want to be?
Oh, I hesitate to say this, somewhere people will hear it, because it's my favorite spot to go hiking, but the Teanaway Community Forest in kind of north central Washington state is some of the best hiking I've ever been in. And I spend a couple weeks there a summer every year, because it's the most relaxing place. There's mountain goats all over. It's marmots. It's beautiful alpine lakes. My favorite spot in the world.
All right. What is next question? What would be your number one book recommendation for an educator right now?
Okay, this is kind of weird. It's called The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. She's out of Stanford, but I really think understanding how willpower works, because we see, you know, everyone says like kids can't stay off their phones, kids can't blah, blah, blah. And really it's just oftentimes I think a fundamental understanding of what willpower really is. Her main point is it's not saying no to things. Don't be on your phone. Don't be on, you know, don't eat a bunch of chips. Don't whatever. It's saying, what do I actually care more about that I want to say yes to? And I think that's where we're seeing, it's valuable for me in my personal life, but as a teacher, that I see a ton of application for working with students.
I'll have to check this one out.
Love it. So speaking of books, we didn't get to it in the previous conversation, but I'll give you a second. You have a book coming out. Do you want to take 30 seconds and give us the quick info on your novel your book, coming out this summer?
Yeah, it's through TimeSpent Publishing. It's part of their Hack Learning series. The working title is Hacking Student Motivation Through Assessment. When I started the book, it was really just focused on assessment. And as I kept writing and working with sort of the publisher and the team, I really just kept coming back to, this is about motivation. Like, that's really what this is coming down to, is how do we help kids feel excited through the grading, and not even grading, but through the assessment practices that we use. And so the book it's 5 different things that we can focus on in our classrooms that really identify these are possibly barriers to motivation that students are experiencing through our assessment and grading practices. And it looks at what are some ways that we can do it differently, or quick fixes in some cases, to make grading reform not feel so overwhelming, so that we can get students to a spot where they're really feeling like ready to engage.
Awesome. Looking forward to that for sure. You mentioned hiking earlier. I know you have that big race coming up soon, but is there, what's the dream hike? Is there a dream location in the States or around the world that's kind of like on your bucket list of places to go?
A few years back, my wife and I went to Iceland for sort of a delayed honeymoon, and we didn't quite get fully set up to do some of the longer backpacking through the highlands, but that is something we did some short hikes up into there. And if I could spend some time really exploring there, that is another world. It's beautiful, but I've never seen like lava flows like that in craters and fjords. And so I would love to hike through the Iceland Highlands someday.
Love it. Beautiful country, to say the least, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we will get you out of here on this one. Who in your life inspires you the most right now?
Oh, man. I'm going to have to, man, this is funny. I always say it's not a Tyler like training and apparently podcast if I don't tear up, because I'm going to throw, my mom has been battling cancer for the last 3 years and just finished a round of radiation and has about 3 months off. And she, teaching's been kind of rough for me at times the last 2 years. And anytime I need some inspiration, I just look to her, because she's gone through a lot and has been strong through it all. So she's definitely my inspiration right now.
I'm sure you make her very proud.
Oh, thank you.
Well, on that, we'll get you out of here, and so you can go get some of your tater tots for. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight to get to know more about you and the fascinating ideas that you're bringing to education. And I hope that they will be more than just in a few pockets in classrooms here and there, and that we'll see this more pervasive throughout the education classrooms across the entire world here soon. So thank you for your work and your leadership in education and spending time with us tonight.
Thank you. I had a great time, and I enjoyed getting to talk to both of you.
Thanks, Tyler. We'll chat with you soon, buddy.
Thank you.
I could listen to that guy talk for hours. He's so smart, so ridiculously smart.
Yeah. And he just oozes a lot of passion, and that he just really cares about his students and really wanting to see change. So amazing guest. Good. Great. Thanks so much for inviting me to the show, Scott.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Well, I've really enjoyed getting to, interact with him and go to his sessions. And, you go to those sessions sometimes, and not only is the content good, but the speaker has the right approach. And most importantly, and you hear it at the end, I mean, I know it pulls at your and my heartstrings, him talking about his mom, like just the passion, right? Anytime somebody can lead with their heart and show that they truly care, I'm all in. So the world could use more educators like Tyler, that's for sure.
Yes, we definitely need more Tylers. Hashtag more Tylers.
Let's get that trending on Twitter right now, right?
Let's do it.
Love it.
Well, I look forward to our next show that we have coming up. And as always, it's great catching up with you, Scott. And I hope, your springtime in California continues to stay warm. And maybe, you guys, since you had some rain this year, you never know what to expect in California. And snow. You guys had snow too recently in Southern California. Crazy.
We've had all the things. We don't know which end is up here in California, but we'll figure it out.
Well, have a great night, friend, and we'll talk soon.
You too. Great to see you, Robin. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you all soon.